Part of the other part of this um, is that in many of the sacred traditions at the highest level, whether it's Buddhism, the idea of the sacred fool, or in the Native American tradition, you have the was it the sacred clown? They kind of called the sacred clown, and these are beings who basically sort of go past and beyond all of the conventions that we take so seriously. Yeah, they're there to help us lighten up all of the attachments and the clinging to the traditions, to the finger pointing at the moon, and keep us looking at the moon. That there is actually wisdom in seeing things, including what we consider to be so sacred and so serious, from an angle that is lighthearted. This is, in the Native American tradition, around sacred clowns, one of the highest teachings. These are people who go around, often they're, I believe they're medicine people, and they go around and they're basically just flouting all the conventions, making horrible noises, and um, basically acting very much out of character than what you would expect for a holy person on a regular basis. In the Buddhist tradition, this notion of the sacred fool or the holy fool, or somebody whose vision has gone so far beyond just kind of the conventional understandings of teaching, where true freedom is really an aspect, rather this view of lightheartedness, playfulness is part of the freedom that is cultivated. And it's not done with malice, although we do know that the Buddha had a tendency towards wry, sarcastic humor when it was called for. There are certain places, and I might just defer to Tajay in the Pali Canon, who's sort of our resident expert in the Pali Canon. But there are passages where the Buddha actually talks to people who are in very conventional, self-important positions and speaks with a very sharp wit. So anyway, part of it is to sort of keep us in the view that doesn't begin to solidify into self-importance in our practice, that doesn't sort of concretize too much. Even the raft itself, the raft in this case is, in Buddhism, is the Buddhist tradition, the set of practices in whatever lineage it may be that takes us to the farther shore. Once we get to the farther shore, we are instructed to relinquish the raft. We don't really need it anymore. Yeah, this is the metaphor. It doesn't mean that Buddhism becomes irrelevant or the wisdom becomes irrelevant. It's just so magnified beyond the form realm, that this sense of freedom and lightness. Marie, I remember now, you mentioned joy, this term of joy in the midst of things as they are, the capacity to be joyful and lighthearted in the midst of samsara. In this case, samsara being that sort of wheel of suffering, that cycle of suffering that we are so addicted to being in, and yet so averse to staying in, and yet being entangled in it, very hard to figure out how to free ourselves from it. And so, yes, our practices, the path itself, are very helpful, very important for us, as is a holding of the path and our practice with enough lightness that allows the spontaneity and the fragrance of freedom to just sort of spontaneously arise. Yeah. In a way, it's that releasing into kind of truth or suchness, things as they are. After all, when you're laughing, you can't really resist any longer. Yeah? When there's laughter, if anything, there is an acknowledgement of something. It may be absurd. In fact, I think absurdity, let's say we recognize when we're over-controlling or over-trying to the point that it's ridiculous. It may feel ridiculous, not that it actually is. And we notice that. And when we can release judgment, this really harsh kind of self-reproach, then the freedom of laughter can arise more spontaneously. And that is it is a drop of freedom that we experience when we can laugh. And not, again, not harsh laughter. It's not like this cartoon I saw when I was a kid. The caption was "Laughter is the best medicine," and it showed a bunch of doctors all pointing at the patient in the bed and laughing hysterically. That is not what I mean. That's mean humor, right? It's my grandfather saw that and he had a cow. That's not funny. You should not look at that kind of stuff. I said, okay, I get it. I hadn't thought of it that way, but then I did. So we're not talking about meanness. We're not talking about judgment. We're talking about release. We're talking about self-awareness in such a way that when we see someone else, perhaps, and their foibles, it reminds us of our own. Yeah. And it's not, oh, I'm glad it happened to them and not me. We may feel that way, but there is a connecting that's possible there. Now, at the risk of overanalyzing humor, which I think in a way is a very bad thing to do. Well, bad not in a judgmental way, okay? Yeah, and the observing part of that, it requires sort of a real, almost a penetrative perception of things. As opposed to just having like a mind that's constantly inattentive, which, you know, if we made a joke about it, it would be how many minds does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is, what was the question? I wrote that one myself, by the way, years ago. Yeah, it's hard work, you know. It's hard. It's hard work, and this is why we need the light-heartedness. You know, it's kind of like the man who wanted to buy a new heart, who said, you know, it's not the parts that get you, it's the labor. You know, it's Patty liked that one. Or Mark Twain's statement, I'm an old man, I've known a lot of problems, most of which never happened. By the way, I'm having a great time. Okay, one more. You all know what happened to Descartes when he was asked if he wanted another drink. He said, I think not, and then he disappeared. Get it? I think, therefore I am. So if I think not, then I disappear. Okay, anyway. Harvard humor. So I guess the main message here is a phrase I coined earlier today, and I was thinking about, so how are we going to do this tonight? But it's really that to enlighten is to lighten up. Yeah, that there is real wisdom. And when all the forms and all of the sort of conventions, the structures, there's nothing wrong with these things, right? Many of us need discipline and we need structures to practice in. And there is a reduction in anxiety when we can go past those boundaries. There is a reduction of anxiety when we can go past the boundaries into the realm of the spontaneous, the unknown, and we can embrace it from a certain angle of vision that doesn't require us to know everything about it. And humor is such a beautiful way to do this. Yeah, a way to say, I don't know what's going to happen, but if I bring my sense of humor with me and I can laugh at things as they occur, life doesn't seem so bad. In the freedom of the ultimate view in the Buddhist tradition, that wisdom arises from this unfettered, boundless nature of mind that is clear. It is already lightened up, it is already joyful, and it is already deeply creative. It is filled with insight and wisdom. And these things just bubble up, and they can bubble up in ways that make people feel better when we can laugh at it, when we can laugh at the suffering. Yeah? We don't laugh at it and dismiss it. It's not dismissive, but it's putting it in a context. And this is one reason, perhaps, why teachers may laugh a lot, even if they're talking about a time where there was suffering. This is not judgmental laughter, it's not mean laughter, it is penetrative insight through the laughter that is arising spontaneously, through understanding. This is at least how I think about it. It brings almost the absurdity or the irony into a particular challenge we have. One thing that I learned from one of my patients at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute when I was chaplain there many years ago, she said, I thought I'd lost, when I got a cancer diagnosis, I thought I'd lost my sense of humor. Couldn't laugh until I realized that really different things were funny. And I never forgot that. And sometimes as we change, if we don't find things funny, like Marie, you were talking about the gentleman who was making very poor taste jokes and such. We may not find those things funny when we start growing. But we then begin to find other things funny. Humor too evolves. Humor too changes. Even if we don't feel like laughing and we don't feel like looking at things in a certain angle of vision that is lighthearted or ironic or absurd, don't be fooled by that. Yeah, there may be other things that are funny in that context. So it's not just one thing. Yeah, it's still possible then to become lighthearted. And I'll give you an example. There was a gentleman who had lung cancer. I followed him as a chaplain for probably about 3 years through this arduous process for him, and I knew his whole family. And I was saying goodbye to him. It was the last time I knew I would see him in the hospital. He was inpatient. He was close to dying. And I was really uncomfortable saying goodbye. Here I am, the chaplain, wishing him well. What do you say? See you later? Have a good trip? No. I mean, there's nothing to say when you're finally saying goodbye other than I really valued knowing you. It was wonderful to spend this time with you, and I'm honored to have walked this journey with you. All these chaplaincy-like things that you say. But ultimately, I felt uncomfortable saying goodbye. And so I very reverently stood up and I backed away, and the whole family was there, and he was lying in the bed. He actually had a whiskey bottle at the side that his friend had brought in the hospital, yes. Don't call the Joint Commission on me, please, because I didn't bring it to him. And the next thing I know, behind me, I feel something on my back, and it tips over, and it was the food tray. And his entire meal went splattering all over the floor and against the door, and it crashed. Yeah. And I was utterly mortified. I was profusely apologizing, like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Oh my, and the whole family was laughing hysterically, including this gentleman who was, he was in stitches laughing. It was just such an absurd, irreverent moment that brought so much wisdom into what was happening there. And then I started laughing. And once I saw he wasn't concerned about his dinner being ruined, then I could laugh. And it was such a beautiful experience. And I was able then to break contact, leave the room, close the door. Of course, when I got outside, I went, "You idiot!" And then I lightened up on myself. Anyway, that was yes, it was a Jerry Lewis moment, Jim. Well said. Jerry Lewis as a chaplain, I think that would have been a great movie. So